News headline update at the bottom of the hour. So to continue from our conversation about the completion of Unit 1 at the Medupi Power Station Project near Lephalale in Limpopo, we are in conversation with Eskom spokesperson Sikonathi Mantshantsha. Sikonathi, thanks for staying with us. So we were still talking about the cost overruns, and obviously there is still more money that needs to be spent. Do you have an estimate at this stage of what it will cost over the next 2 years in terms of what Eskom has outlined to bring everything online?
The budgeted amount, Sakina, is 135 billion rands as things stands now.
135 billion over 2 years, and this will be for what exactly?
There are the design defects that have to be completed. These are on the boilers mostly, and that there are claims by some of the contractors against Eskom, and these matters will take some time to be resolved. So that is what the budget is on.
So ultimately, for the consumer, it comes down to what does this mean for us on a day-to-day basis in a country that has seen blackouts, on a scale that we had never imagined in 2007. And now you have load shedding that's become part of our lexicon in this country. So what does this mean, Medupi and its completion for the South African consumer of Eskom electricity?
This unit has been generating electricity for just over a year now. It has been put through the tests, and that is the period that has been required for it to be to meet all the safety requirements, the operational requirements, and the legal requirements. So it doesn't change much in the way of capacity as it stands today, and it doesn't change much in the way of reducing load shedding. What we do have in this unit is that we can now count on it going forward and say we have installed this amount of electricity. But on a day-to-day basis, it doesn't change much for the consumer at home because, as I have said previously, it has been generating electricity for a year, except informally, so to speak.
So I read somewhere that since 2005, we've had more than 500% increase in our electricity tariffs as South African consumers. And this is set to continue because you will have to borrow more money. But how are you going to do this for the 135 billion rand? Because you were downgraded by Standard & Poor's to junk status as Eskom.
Sakina, you will have noticed during the year that Eskom has actually reduced its debt, outstanding debt, from 484 billion rand to just over 400 billion rand. And that is for the year ended March 2021. And that is set to further reduce because the borrowings were required to build this power station, to build the Kusile power station. So we are actually reducing the debt. And of course, I did state previously that this infrastructure was built with borrowed money. That is why we had to have that debt escalating. And indeed, the costs to which you are correctly referring, they were to fund this expenditure. Now that we are about 90% done or 100% done in the case of Medupi, and 90% done in the case of Kusile, the debt is on its downward trajectory. The reality, though, it still has to be serviced and to be paid back, and that is what the people of South Africa are paying for in the electricity prices we have just mentioned.
And this is a bitter pill to swallow because it is not the people of South Africa who were responsible for the defects, for the cost overruns of this particular project and others. So, in terms of that, just an update on the recovery of some of these funds, because as Ted Blom says, there was proper state capture that happened at Eskom in terms of what was being done in terms to siphon off money from the power utility. So how much of this has been recovered?
It is common cause indeed that the Eskom has really been at the center of state capture, the corruption particularly at the Medupi and at the Kusile Power Station. That is the reality we have to live with. And yes, you are absolutely correct. It is not the people of South Africa that were designing and building Medupi. It was Eskom and its constructors. And that is... those just are the facts. How much has been recovered? We have given all the updates at the appropriate time during the past few years. Let me start by repeating again that Eskom has laid about 113 criminal charges with the police with regards to corruption that took place at Medupi, at Kusile, and across Eskom in general. We await the action of the law enforcement agencies on that, those being the police and the national prosecuting authorities. There has been only arrest in one case, and that is going before the courts with regards to the Kusile Power Station. The Eskom itself, and this is what Eskom can do, the rest is up to the law enforcement agencies. Eskom can sue all those responsible for the losses, the criminality that took place, and it has launched court cases in Johannesburg and in Pretoria to try and recover the money from some of the people. Voluntarily, or rather in agreement with Eskom, we've had companies such as Mckinsey and Deloitte Consulting paying back, and ABB paying back monies that were indeed pilfered as a result of the illegality of which we have spoken. Those are the updates we have been giving regularly to the people of South Africa.
Just out of curiosity, those companies that have paid monies back to Eskom, are they still doing business with Eskom?
They would have had more than one contract in some instances. So yes, they are still doing business with Eskom. Remember, the law in South Africa, you cannot discriminate against any entity for any other reason other than illegality on that particular contract. So once those agreements have been reached and the companies have paid back, the law takes its course in terms of the criminal prosecutions, which is outside of Eskom's control. But the law requires Eskom to put out every contract competitively for everyone to tender. And if those companies are interested in tendering, they do so. If they had other contracts that were not affected by corruption, there is no reason to remove them.
So no blacklisting at Eskom?
The law does not allow you to just blacklist people for where there is no evidence of corruption. If there is evidence of corruption in a particular case, you deal with that particular case, and that is what has happened here. Where there have been agreements where Eskom has removed indeed some companies without agreement with them. Others, in the case of ABB, because the work that they were doing there was 95% complete at the time when they agreed to pay back the money. It would not have been possible, and it would not have been beneficial to Eskom and to the people of South Africa to scrap that contract and start all over again, because the work was almost complete.
But Sikonathi, how should we then, as the South African public, the South African taxpayers, trust the work that is going on now? Because we are here because of incompetence, because of malfeasance, because of corruption. And these companies behaved unethically. They paid back the money. You talk about proof of wrongdoing. Why did they pay back the money if there was no wrongdoing there?
What you have said about these companies having behaved unethically can equally be said about Eskom itself.
Oh yeah,
the reality,
absolutely.
Exactly. So that is why we are. Those are just the facts that people that worked for Eskom at the time, and indeed some of them probably still do work for Eskom, behaved unethically. That is why we have had this criminality that we are referring to.
My point exactly. So why do you continue doing business with companies, with corporate citizens who behaved in an unethical manner?
I have explained to you that you will have a specific contract that a company works on. When you uncover corruption in that contract, you deal with that company in that particular contract. If there was an existing prior contract to that has not been impacted by corruption, you cannot find that company guilty on that particular contract when you do not have evidence of corruption.
Let me ask it this way. Let me ask it this way more specifically. Let's take Mckinsey.
Yes.
In terms of the money that Mckinsey paid back to Eskom, why did they pay the money back? What did they do wrong that necessitated them to pay back the money?
They paid back the money because they were involved in a contract with Trillion that Eskom itself admitted in 2017 that actually there was no work done on this particular contract. There is no value that Eskom derived from the work of Trillion and from the work of Mckinsey on a particular contract, and that money was paid back after indeed pressure from the public and indeed pressure from the media.
So they were happy to take money for work that had not been done.
And Eskom officials were happy to pay over money illegally for work that had not been done.
But you just said you have criminal prosecutions pending for the Eskom employees who were guilty of that.
Indeed, that's the same for the Mckinsey employees who were guilty of that.
So you don't see anything wrong with continuing to do business with entities that behaved in such an abhorring way, that have landed the South African public with more than 400 billion rand of debt sitting there at Eskom? We're just supposed to accept that, oh, they only did wrong on one project, they are quite all right on everything else.
Sakina, I will repeat that again. The same can be said of people who worked for Eskom, who are currently no longer in the employ of Eskom, who have had to leave Eskom. Mckinsey has had those issues. Exactly. You have different people working on different projects, just like today you have different people working on different projects inside Eskom. I don't know what the person sitting in the next office is doing. If that particular person is guilty of any particular crime, that does not make the rest of Eskom guilty. You get those elements, you weed them out using the processes and the evidence that you have gathered, and remove those rotten elements from the organization. That is what has happened at Eskom over the years. You and I have been, and that is what has happened with all contracts whose evidence of corruption has come to the fore, that has been exposed, and Eskom has dealt with those to remove them from the system and claw back the monies. We have recovered close to 3 billion rand in cash that has been taken in this way. And of course, there's a whole lot more to go. Hence, I told you that there are civil cases going on in the courts. There are criminal cases that are pending with the law enforcement agencies.
So the design defects on the boilers, the companies, the people involved in coming up with those defective designs, are they still working on fixing the very same designs that they messed up?
As you know, in the case of Eskom, there have been many changes at executive level, and I'm not only talking about the board and the chief executive here. Across all the senior managerial levels, there have been no less than 6 project managers at the Medupi Power Station itself. There certainly have been many changes in terms of the people who designed the power station itself and in the execution. So you have had over the past 14 years wholesale changes. The agreement that was made with the contractors and with the designers of the station is, let us fix the problems now that we agree what the solutions are, and we will then have to decide who is responsible. The contribution to fix those, to repair the defects, Eskom is paying half of the cost and the contractors are paying the other half. Once liability has been established through a process, either in a court process if there is no agreement in the bilateral forums, then the party that is found to have been responsible for the bad designs will pay the other, the 50%.
Sikonathi, we're going to have to leave it there for today, but you know, you and I will speak more about what's going on at Eskom. And just a final one, because I asked Ted Blom about this, just with regard to that issue with South 32 and Eskom actually procuring coal at a better rate. How far is that?
That agreement has been settled. Now it has come into place since July. Eskom did obtain all the approvals from the National Treasury to deviate on the contract. It did obtain all the mining licenses, and we are now secure in getting supply for the Medupi Power Station from the company you have just mentioned.
Sikonathi, thanks for your time this morning. Eskom spokesperson Sikonathi Mantshantsha, and talking about the power utilities Medupi project finally being completed and the impact that it will have on electricity generation in the future. I mean, you heard an energy expert earlier, you heard Sikonathi. You'll make up your mind in terms of where this is at. Let's take a quick break.